pushing it.
Okay. Hi, welcome to a special Friday edition of the Sisters Interview. My name is Ashaxi. I'm a member of the Order of the Laurel in Ontier, and this is my sister Sir Rifkin, Knight, Pelican, and Lion of Ontier. And tonight our guest is Sir Eva von Danzig, Order of the Laurel, from Lochac. So welcome. Thank you for joining us. Well, thank you for joining us too. So we usually start these off with how you found the SCA and how you got into it.
So my origin story, I thought I've told it a few times and I always keep it a bit short, but I thought I'd give you like the kind of crazy expanded version.
Awesome.
So my dad dabbled in the SCA before I was born over in Atlantia. So I was born in Charlotte, North Carolina. And it's funny because I've had conversations with my dad in the past where he was like, you know, I always wanted to have kids and I always wanted a girl and I always wanted her to fight with swords. So somehow, like, it wasn't really on my radar as something that was not what kids did, because I grew up with, you know, little plastic suits of armor, and I grew up, you know, playing with plastic swords, and eventually those got circumvented for padded things because I would clearly like beat them up with the swords too much. And so it's interesting because for me that was never a question of whether or not girls could fight with swords. So I just grew up that way. And then we moved around a lot when I was a kid. And then when I was 11, we moved over to Australia, which is where I live now, in Adelaide, which is the southern part of Australia in South Australia. And when I was about 11, he decided to actually join the SCA at that time again. And I went along a couple of times and went, I don't really care, this isn't for me. But then when I was 12, I got to see heavy fighting and I went, that looks really interesting. I think I'm interested in this. So I started like dabbling and training at that time. But there was a point where some new rules rolled in and they went, you can't even touch rattan until you're 14, which unfortunately a good friend of mine, Master Yevon, had to tell me. He always tells me that was like one of the worst days, is that he had to tell this little girl, I'm really sorry, but you can't fight with swords right now. You can later. So basically from the point that I could start to interact with training is really when my SCA journey commenced. So I started training again when I was 14. I did SCA fencing for a little while just so I could do something that involved swordplay. And then I got authorized at 16. Just before that time, I met, at the time, my friend, Felix, who later on became my partner. Actually, I think we got together when we were like 17. So just before my 18th birthday, and we've been together ever since. And he was always like, you interviewed him previously, so he was always really dedicated. He did so much pal work and watched so many great fighters on YouTube and really exposed me to that like wider world of what fighting really could be. And probably the moment that really changed everything for me was the first time I got to travel outside of our barony. And go to Roni Festival, which is Australia's biggest gathering. There are people that come all over from Australia and New Zealand and come together for a week of everything. It's our biggest event. So we have, you know, fighting and arts and sciences, and everybody's doing amazing amounts of service to run it. So that really exposed me, and I met so many great people and some SCA family that I still have today. So that was it. From that point, I was hooked and serious, and I pretty much haven't stopped since that time.
So I have to share the picture of you as a little kid real quick, just because it's so cute.
I threw it in because of that. It's me and my dad when I was 3. So I was a bit more of a little princess than I maybe became for a long time, but I got to relive that again as an adult, so that's fun, or at least getting to wear the pretty dresses.
So fun. All right, so I won't keep it up forever, but so cool. So did your dad fight too, or he just wanted you to fight?
So he did. There's a funny story about that because my dad and I, like my dad was a martial artist from the time he was a kid. He dabbled in SCA fighting before I was born, like I said, over in Atlantia. And then he didn't really play until we got back into it when I was a preteen. He tried heavy for a little while, but found that it was a little bit too heavy for him. So he fenced for a long time. He's not really active now, which is a shame, but we're still, we get banned from talking about fighting for too long at family gatherings, which is kind of fun. But it's funny because I wanted to go into a second generation tournament that they held one year at Roni Festival. And I didn't know that much about how much he fought beforehand. And I had asked him, I went, so there's this tournament I want to enter. So did you fight? And he goes, yeah, I fought. Well, did you get authorized? Did you fight in tournaments? He goes, there weren't really authorizations as such. I fought. And I went, okay, how many tournaments did you fight in? He was like, 2. And I went, at this point, I had been a squire for years and I'd fought for, like half a decade. And I'm like, now I am the man of the house.
Nice. So did you and Felix start training with each other like right away, like when you were 17?
Yeah. So the funny thing is, and I've said it a few times before, I'm not a naturally talented fighter at all. I also find Pell work very boring, unfortunately. So I didn't get straight into that side of training. And I found it really difficult, especially with the culture of the group that we're in, because we are very segregated. It was a very small group. And so the people that took an interest in training me didn't have the best technical grasp. And so I couldn't throw a snap with power. Actually, so in contrast, Felix got authorized on his 16th birthday. I had a test authorization just after my 16th birthday, and I actually didn't get authorized for another 10 months because I couldn't throw with any power. So they sort of went, you need to do some work to get there. So Felix actually started training me from that point. So from the point that he saw that I wasn't going anywhere, but I really wanted to be successful, he started inviting me around to his house so that we could do Pell training. And he pretty much taught me the basics. Like I had already kind of learned them, but I didn't solidify them until I had that extra training. And he always says that he honestly just wanted more people to fight. So, as much as I'd like to say that it was all about me, it was very much about the fact that he, from me 16, wanted to nurture fighting. And I was like a byproduct of that. And as soon as I felt the first time I could throw a snap with effortless power, that was it. I was like, I need to learn more. But certainly we started fighting before we were a couple, and we've never really stopped. I didn't realize it was actually as common as it is to have fighting couples. But I know that the fact that we can actually fight and compete with each other is kind of unusual. So I try to share a little bit about that when people are interested in it, because we have worked really hard. It's not instinctive. I have a lot of weird emotional hangups that we had to overcome. And then you build that as a couple as well, where you have like, I've reacted bad for so many years that now he sees a face that I make that's my concentrating face. He's like, no, we're done for the day. And I'm like, but I'm learning.
We should talk about it a little bit. I mean, I want to talk about your journey too, but my husband and I actually can fight each other too, but my boyfriend before him was not good. But my husband, like, he can see my thought bubbles, and like there'll be a thought bubble that says, fuck you, motherfucker, and he will back off.
Yeah. I have a face, so I do get a little bit of resting bitch face, especially when I'm concentrating and I'm ticking it through in my brain. But he could see there's a point, because what would happen is actually that he is so invested in me doing well that he really wants to give me all of the information. And if there's a point that I'm done, or even he likes to coach during the fight, and I don't respond well to learning that way. I hate being interrupted in a fight, because he'll jump in and be like, hold on for a second. Can you just, and I'm like, I did that in my brain. I did that. But we all know from as fighters, what we actually are physically doing is very different to what is actually happening. So I would have like a bad reaction. And that was probably a good like 5 years of our training together. It was like, he would be helpful. I would turn into like a monster adrenaline bitch and be like, I'm doing it. And then snap out of it and be like, I'm really sorry. I don't know why I don't know why I said that. So it's interesting. I think we're all different. Like the psychology of combat is amazing. And then adrenaline on top and emotions with partners it's just like unmeasurably interesting.
Yeah, I think it really helps when both parts of the couple want to see the other part succeed and you're not actually competing with each other about who's better. Because I think like the problems happen when that competing with each other to see who's the top dog happens, because it's just totally not healthy for a couple to do that.
No.
You're right.
It's not something I talk about a lot, but one of the things that changed and one of the reasons that we train as well as we do, and this might, kitty cat, this might sound bad, but there was a point at which Felix was a knight and I was, you know, a budding squire. I'm really wanting to succeed. But one of the things that I had to kind of accept was that I was going to be the student in particular times, even though I absolutely want to kill him in fights and I try my best to do so. When there is a time to learn, I have to hold that humility and say, I'm putting myself, even though we are equals as a couple, at this moment, he will be the teacher and I am open to learning.
Does he do that for you too at times?
Yes, it depends on what's going on. But I would say so. He's very open and considerate and courteous. So probably, but it's not like he says, now's the time that I am the student. But I know that there are times
so. For me, I got knighted 8 years before my husband. So we got married like, I guess, a year after I got knighted. So I was always the better fighter, at least for a very long time. And then, you know, when we could start teaching each other, that was super cool. Just sometimes I find that sometimes they over help you and your brain can only hold so much. And then that's when the thought bubbles start coming up. But luckily he can read me now and we've communicated. I think communication is really the key. So.
Yes. We use tricks like we, at the time, probably at my happiest, I was training 3 times a week, but for a long time we trained twice a week together. And so we basically said, because when I started to click a lot more, I would know what I wanted to do in the next fight. So when he would interrupt and tell me to do potentially what I was thinking a lot of the time, it would frustrate me because I explained that what you're doing is you're making it seem like I can't fix my own problem, but I know I can. And I have a weird squiring story, but you know, I always had a knight. So even though Felix was teaching me on the home front, there was always outside influences. So I was usually working on other stuff. So what we agreed upon was, you know, Wednesday night was Felix's coaching night where he could interrupt as much as he wanted and I couldn't get mad. And Sundays were my day that I got to decide what my goals were and I got to not get interrupted. But what we did to help with the communication side of things was that I would pick my 1 to 3 goals for my training session and write it in a book. I put it in my bag and he doesn't get to see it until the end of the night or the day, as it were. So that way he could still provide me feedback, but he also didn't get to counter what I was throwing at him because he doesn't like being hit. So what would happen is if I said at the start of the session, well, I'm really working on this combination, he would inherently block that thing because he doesn't want to get hit by it. Nobody wants a deep offside or a wrap to the butt or any of those things. So this meant that I could practice those things. And then he, at the end of the day, got to look and go, you were successful here. Maybe this I didn't see so much. So it really did help us communicate.
That's interesting. I didn't think about him like, because we'll talk on the way to practice about what I'm working on, and then he'll help me make sure I'm still focusing on it. He won't use it so he won't get hit by me. At least I don't think he does. So very clever, Felix. So tell us about your squiring story then. Yeah.
So it's kind of convoluted, so I'm going to try and measure it through the best I can. So one of the things that I know is probably common for a lot of us who are women in fighting is that, at least in my experience, I've only ever had support from people around me. I've had so many people encourage me, but part of that is that everybody wants to help you, and people are very interested in being part of your journey. You know, one of the things you hear commonly is that women who are invested in fighting will be like inundated with feedback left, right, and center from whoever you fought that day, or somebody that watched your fighting, or, you know, you get a lot, which is good because I like feedback, but sometimes it's also overwhelming because everybody wants to be a part of that. So coming from South Australia, our closest group is 8 hours drive away. Rowanee Festival's a 14-hour drive, and we have to drive because it's a camping event. And so that first Rowanee Festival, when I was 18 years old, I went, and Felix was part of an already established household. And they were all, I was very lucky to fall into this group because we were all very technical and technical fighters, with good technique being the foremost important piece to learn. And so he was already a squire in the household. And I met a good friend of mine, Sir Philippe Dulac, who was my first knight. So I got squired pretty much just after that event. We actually took a trip up to Canberra where he lived, and then it was after Rowanee Festival that he sort of went, "Are you interested in being a squire?" And we got along like a house on fire. Like, we still do. He's a very good friend. We just don't speak as much as I'd probably like to. But you know, I accepted being a squire probably a little bit early because, again, this is the first time I'm out of the barony. Also, in Ulgard, our local barony had no active knights. So Felix was the first made in something like 23 years. Wow. So
how old were you?
18.
18, okay.
Yeah. And so that was fine. And I was his squire for a couple of years. But then, you know, his life circumstances changed. He started seeing a lady who's now his wife. And so the SEA kind of became a non-priority. So he stopped playing. And one of the things that I was seeing at the time, especially in Lochac, is we had a lot of, I called them orphan squires. So, you know, squires that their knights stop playing, but they are so loyal that they continue to wear the belt, but they're not getting the guidance on the path that you would get if you had an active knight. And I had decided pretty early on that I needed guidance, and I needed that help, and I needed to walk the path with someone, not just to wear the regalia and say that I was connected to somebody. That's not what I wanted. So I sadly handed the belt back. And then I got fostered by the same knight as Felix, Duke Cornelius. And it was under the proviso that if Philippe came back, then you should go back to him. But he tutored me for a few years. And that relationship ended under sad circumstances. He broke fealty. So I handed the belt back at that point. And there was a 1 month period where this was probably, I'd say, a year and a half before I was put on vigil. So Felix, already being a knight by this stage, knew that I was getting close, and he knew that this was an imperative time. And he felt, in my mind, I went, maybe I can just do this on my own. I'll be fine. And Felix felt that pressure, and suddenly our trainings for that month were awful because he just felt he wanted it for me so badly. He wanted me to be successful, and he felt the burden of guiding me was on his shoulder, which is not a healthy relationship standard. And it's unfair to place that burden on his shoulders. And I'd been, for probably about 6 months before this, I'd already been talking a lot with Duke Mark de Arundel from the West Kingdom, because Felix and I traveled to the West Kingdom a couple of times, and I'd gotten to train with Mark, and he is an amazing teacher and an amazing fighter, an amazing human, and we got on like a house on fire. So I had already kind of been getting feedback from him, and at the point that everything kind of blew up in the household, he'd contacted me and said, look, you might not want this, but if you do feel like you need to have that bond and to have that relationship, I would be happy to take you on. This is how we'll make it work. It was all upfront because obviously from Australia to California is it's a bit of a trek. But, yeah, like we had a plan for the long term of, you know, we would see each other at least every other year. He was willing to make that happen. We talked pretty much almost every day at a certain point, but we both filmed our trainings because one of the things that we both believe in is that the path is not just about the knight tutoring the squire. We walk the path together. So that bond is very strong, and that, you know, I can be of assistance to him and he can be of assistance to me. And that's something that we've carried even after I became a knight. So after a month of poor Felix feeling very burdened, I took Mark up on that offer. And then it was a year later that I was put on vigil. So that's, I always really admire the squires that do I took a belt and I will be loyal to that person until the time that I am a knight. But that just wasn't the path that I was willing to take.
But what's really cool about what you did is that you recognized what you needed, and you needed a coach, and you needed an active coach, and you were willing to do what was necessary to get that. And I think that is amazing, because a lot of people are loyal to a fault. So anyway, and it's not like you left on bad terms with any of them except for the one that broke fealty. So, right? Yeah. So how was it for the time that you guys were both squire to Cornelius? How was it sharing a night? Because I had that, my ex-boyfriend and I shared a night, and it was interesting.
It was actually fine. We didn't really have any problems. I mean, especially at the time, of course, there were the jokes of like, now we're brother and sister, that's weird, incest. But aside from that, like our households, which many of the members of that household are now part of our household today, and we love them like family. So there's it was more of like a group feel. It didn't matter really who you were bonded to so much. And if I remember correctly, I think Felix maybe, I think he was actually knighted not long after, or maybe he was already a knight by the time that happened. I can't remember, I'm so sorry. Okay. But it didn't really make too much of a difference. I would say that there was probably more of a tension because the things, and this sounds awful, but there was a period of time during that relationship that all of the feedback that I was getting was stop rushing. And I would go, okay, cool, don't rush. Yeah, you have all the time in the world. Okay, cool. Now, Felix, of course, gave me feedback every training on things I could try, but when I would travel interstate, see my knight, that would be the feedback that I got was stop rushing. I went, okay, cool, I'll fight slower. So then you get into a fight and you're like, I'll slow it down, and then you get one-shotted because you're slow. And I could never work out what it was, and neither could Felix, because he could see what Cornelius meant, but it wasn't being articulated in any different way. And so it wasn't until that I was training with Mark that he went, the thing is, you don't have to accept every engagement, especially if it's bad for you. You don't get extra points for killing them faster. And I went, oh yeah, you don't, because it's so simple. And that changed the entire way I thought about the engagement and the conversation of the fight. And I'd said to Felix after that point, like, never tell me I'm rushing, because I never want to hear those words ever again. So that was probably the weirdest thing about it, was just that, you know, Felix being a knight in his own right at that stage is just going, I think there's got to be a better way of articulating that, but he's your knight, so whatever. Like,
that's cool that you found someone that spoke your language. That's cool.
Yeah, so important.
So I know you started the interview out saying that you're not naturally gifted at fighting, but people tend to look at a woman who gets knighted and think, oh, wow, she has all this talent. She must have been super athletic. Just so people know how hard you worked, how hard were you working? What were you doing in that year and a half leading up to when you got knighted?
Yeah. So one of the things, and I should preface this by saying that you don't have to be fit to be a good fighter. But one of the things that changed for me when I was about 2021, because I never did sport in school. I was always the chubby girl. And I couldn't physically do much. Like, I think before I left for Australia, I was at a school in California that made you do like run a mile every week, once a week. And I couldn't do that. I couldn't run a mile, jog a mile. So for me, one of the things that I started doing at about like 2021 was I decided I'm gonna start going to the gym and I'm gonna get fit. And I started seeing a trainer, and I ended up losing something like 12 kilos in 12 weeks. So pounds, like 24, I can't remember kilos to pounds. Look it up, sorry. But
I'll Google that.
We're the ones on the stupid imperial system, so.
Right.
Right.
But it was funny because I found that I enjoyed certain aspects of the workout. Like I enjoyed doing weights. So at that point, the 12 weeks, I lost a lot of fat, but I was like a husk of a human. I had no muscle. But then what I found was I was actually more naturally set towards less of the cardio and more of the weights. So I started doing a lot more squats and deadlifts and functional work, and I would do high intensity interval training because I like to get the hard stuff done. I don't like to be there for too long. And I found that there was a lot of physical benefit from that, because suddenly when I was fighting, I wasn't getting puffed. And, it's easier to do things because if your body's fit, it's easier to carry the weight of your armor. And I could fight all day. I could be on the pickup field all day after half a day of war, and I wasn't getting tired. And the year before I got knighted, I was training 3 times a week. I would do some intermittent pel work, but it wasn't a day-to-day thing. Like, I'm so inspired by how dedicated you are, because I just go, I should go outside and do my pel work, but I could do my laundry and then I'll go, and then it'll just be the whole night is gone. But yeah, I would go to fighter practice 3 times a week. We traveled as much as possible. I took a couple of specific training trips. Like I went to Queensland, where they have a small plethora of nights just to train. Just one weekend I went, there's no events on, whoever wants to come fight me, can you come fight me? Because I would really love that. And we also, in probably the 5 years before I was knighted, we started traveling to the West. And we got 2 trips in, and it would just be 3 weeks of training every second day or every third day. And we would sort of couch hop from house to house and meet people and get to fight them. And I feel like those experiences were really what put me into gear. But it's a lot of money, because especially traveling through Australia, you have to fly most of the time. So that was the amount that I did. And when I'm at fighter practice, I have very specific goals as well. It's not just going out to fight for the sake of fighting. Especially once I started corresponding with Mark and learning from him, we have a specific aim, and you're going to work on, I worked on it at training, and it would be something to make my fighting better. There were days that you go out and you're like, I'm just going to have a fun day today, and that's fine. And that's a good time to kind of test where you're at, because your instincts have to kick in. But yeah, that was pretty much what I was doing in the year before.
I think it's so important that people understand how much you take initiative and making sure you're getting the training that you need. Because flying from Australia to California is at least $1,000, probably more, closer to 2. And you're taking 3 weeks of your vacation to basically fight. And people, it's so important that people understand that what you make a priority is what you're going to excel at.
Absolutely. And it's so worth the money, because the thing that I've come to learn is that fighting is an art. Everyone has a slightly different take. So the more that you can correspond with people, the more you can learn from them and meet someone who you're more likely to find someone who communicates the way you do. And I'm a very kinesthetic learner as well. So I need to do things to be able to really cement it. And part of that means that it's better to be in the place with the person so that they can guide you through. And then from the time you feel it, suddenly you can reproduce it. So we've gotten to meet so many amazing fighters that way. And a lot of it is just putting the feelers out. And so it's one of those things of, I really wanted to stress, like, if you want something, make it happen. Right. You know, people want to teach, people want to be admired. So all you have to do is reach out.
Right. And you can do the same thing with the people that you don't want to learn from. I mean, there are ways where you can deflect, right? And then learn from the people that you want to learn from. You don't have to be polite and sit there and listen to someone if it's not working for you. Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Reclaim your time.
Yeah.
Take up space.
I mean, you can be respectful, but yeah, absolutely. If you know something's not for you, I can't remember. I think it may be a Bruce Leeism, but I might be wrong. So if people are yelling, I'm sorry. But you know, it's learn from everyone and take in what works for you, and you know what doesn't work for you. Put it aside, because then you know kind of how to best that person. You know, all information is useful information. It's not all for you though.
Yeah. So one thing, we'll get to your knighting, but one thing about you that I've noticed in the pictures and the videos and stuff I've seen is you have amazing kits. And I realized after talking to Felix that he's an armorer, but I mean, your shields match your helmet, match your kit. And I think you have like 3 or 4 kits like that are perfect for the period. What did you start with? Did you start sword and shield? What kind of sword and shield? Working with Mark, did you do bastard sword?
He probably wishes that I did. I wish that I did. No. When I first started, I was put in amalgamated kind of loner gear that fit. So I had sort of like generic legs. There was a lady in the barony, Lady Nicolette, who lent me pretty much her cuirass. She had a cuirass with a skirt of plates and a helmet that was probably too light for SEA combat, because by the time I was done with it, it was dented in badly. So we got rid of it, and I'm sorry because I had to apologize to her. She came back to fighting and she goes, "Have you seen my helmet?" I went, "I think it's gone." I'm so sorry. But it was not good for people's health, to be quite honest. So I looked awful. But that was pretty much at the point where Felix started training me. He already had a workshop at that point. Like, he was already dabbling with armor. So he very lovingly actually made me my own first Corazina that I even wear now. So the breast protection that I currently have is a 14th century Corazina. And he made that with a skirt of plates that was just basically a vest jacket that I wore underneath that had aluminium plates. It's aircraft grade aluminium, and I have used that pretty much on and off my entire fighting career. I've just recovered it. I've got rid of the skirt of plates because I found I didn't need the extra protection anymore. So pretty much getting linked up with an armorer is the reason that I have so many kits. But generally, the things that I make are to accentuate that. So having like the full picture was really important to me even early on, because I think in the pictures you'll see later, I think I did like my first set of things that I made to accompany my armor. Because one of the things that I found, because I did a lot of music through high school, and one of the things they talked about was when you do your performance, you make sure that you look good, because even if you mess up, so long as you look good, people will respond to that, and you're much more confident because you know you look good. So before you even sing a note, you're already coming to it from a place of confidence. And so I know there's a running joke of like, if you're not going to win a fight, leave a beautiful corpse. I wasn't really on that end. I was much more of a, this will make my fighting better because I look the part and I look knightly. And that's kind of why that came about. So my first harness was awful. Felix started making armor for me. And then once I started like learning how to sew, I would make a surcoat to match. And our household were all 15th century Burgundian style. So eventually I got a sallet. And so it was like, that was the perfect picture. But the banners that I made to go with it and that I would make for the household were to match that as well. So one of the things I always think is funny about being a Laurel is I feel like I cheated a little bit because most of the stuff I was making was to help with my fighting. No joke, in the Laurel that I was apprenticed to actually spoke at my knighting, and one of the things she said is that I was the worst apprentice because every time she would be like, here's this book that I think you should read that has really interesting things about period painting and banners, and I'd be like, I want to talk about fighting, and that's all I would do is talk about the philosophy of fighting or some stuff going on in the kingdom. And she's like, I'll just put this here for you.
Did you grow up sewing? I know you have an art background.
I did not grow up sewing. I do have an art background. So I've always been pretty arty, but more on the drawing, painting side of things. And my stepmother, who my dad moved to Australia to be with, is a very good seamstress, but she was very interested in 16th century Italian and would do that. So she made me my first few outfits that were gorgeous, but me being like a scrappy teenager, I sort of went, no, I don't want to do that. That's not what I like. And so I went, no, I want to be German, which has not left me, by the way. So I was not wrong. But I think she probably got a little frustrated with that and went, you know what, if you want new garb, you make it yourself. And she sat me down in front of her machine, showed me how it worked. And I went, okay, cool. But by this time, luckily, I was already linked up with the larger household, again, doing Burgundian stuff. And so there were Laurels in the household that went, well, we'll pattern you for a kirtle. Okay, here's the pattern. This is what you want to get. You want wool or linen, and go. And so I would come home and I kind of had to teach myself how to sew. There was like minimal guidance, like obviously being taught how the sewing machine worked, or me completely messing up the sewing machine going, Mom, can you tell me what I've done wrong? And by that time, it was pretty much, getting guidance on how something should be constructed, take it home, have a go at it. I managed to get a few kirtles and like Burgundian overgown put together. And then I really found that what I really enjoyed was making headwear, which is not one of my specialties, but because it's such like quick glee that you get from making a hat. And that's pretty much how that went. And then embellishment was the other thing that I really loved doing. So I remember one of the Italian gowns that my mother had made for me, I ended up embroidering little squirrels on them because I have squirrels on my device, except I did it with sewing thread. I just put bunches of sewing thread together and kind of did like a basic like back stitch to fill it all in. So I was a little bit crazy, but it came together. It just wasn't made of the right stuff.
Wow.
Oh, and my first sword and shield you asked about, my first sword was like a hand-me-down piece, and my first shield was like a weird bunny round that was probably more like a heater, but didn't have a point at the bottom. So, but I looked at that too.
What do you prefer? Side mounted or center mounted?
Center mounted, definitely. I found that the feeling is different, and I used a strapped bunny round for a long time and moved to a strapped heater, and it wasn't really until I started using a center boss shield, which I know doesn't look appropriate with the 14th century look that I'm currently in, but it just, the way it feels and the way the defense works just feels so much more natural to me. And it's because when you're strapped, it's all about punching to the side or meeting it with that front edge. And it means that you have an asymmetric defense. And I didn't like that. I like much more having the defense in front of me, where I can move it through the four quarters with some sword defense as well. And it just feels so much more natural.
Cool. So were you laureled or knighted first?
Knighted first.
Knighted first. Okay.
So I was knighted in 2015, and then I was made a laurel in 2017.
So pretty quick.
Yeah. I feel like the art was all linked. So I don't know the background of what was happening at the time, but certainly I always feel like it was all linked together, because I was making a lot of the really pieces that I'm proudest of were made for either my ceremony or for a friend's ceremony that was the same year that I got knighted. So it was kind of interesting progression, I suppose.
Well, if you watched my sister and I interview each other on Wednesday, you know that that's what I think too. It's like you find your passion and then you expand what you're interested in to feed your passion. So
Yeah.
I totally get that, and I don't think it's cheating.
Oh, absolutely. And it's funny as well, because having multiple harnesses is always like a fancy of, I'll see someone else's harness that I really love, and then I'll be like, oh, check this out. Or Felix will want to make something, and then I'll look at it and go, that is cool. I have to make the rest to go with it. So like up here, I have my Rus helm that's modeled off of Duke Thorfinn's, because we saw his harness and went, that looks so cool. I want one of those. So Felix made it, and we collaborated on like the faceplate and the artwork for it. I did, and then I had to make the rest of the stuff go with it, because I think overall what I enjoy is having that picture be complete. So we're thinking about doing another armor project soon, which will be a lot of fun, but it's a lot of work.
Were you gonna ask something, Ashaksi?
Oh, I was just gonna say that you do kind of feel like you cheated on your pelican.
What? Oh, well,
you do. I'm gonna just call you out on that.
Okay, she's right. She's right. I hate it when she's right. That's fine. That's fine.
I listened to your interview the other day, and that was something that really resonated with me. Was you'd said you just wanted to improve the culture around you, and I think that is amazing. Like, we can all be doing that. There's no reason to wait for somebody else to do something that you know you can do yourself. Like, I had to teach myself how to sew, because I couldn't afford anything. So I wanted glorious things. Nobody's going to give it to you. You just have to do it. And there's so many people that will help you along the way. Or, you know, you want to bring fighters out, and you did that, and you created that culture. And that's important. Like, if we all had that attitude, we would have utopia.
Yeah.
Right? It would be like Christmas every day.
Yeah. People put so much energy into complaining about the thing they think is wrong. And if they put all that energy into positive change, it'd be amazing.
Yeah. I was going to say, maybe we should look at some of your fighting pictures, because they're so cool.
And we've been talking about all these different kits. It would be awesome for people to see it.
Let me see. So there's you and your dad. So there we go.
Ah, cool. Yes. This one was fairly early on. Not super, super early. I think there's earlier pictures that'll come up. But I wanted to throw this in because this was a surcoat that took me 3 years to complete. And it wasn't because I was working on it hammer and tongs for 3 years. It's just one of those things of I hand applicate it, I hand embroidered it. I have the little ermine spots that are all embroidered. And I embroidered all the details. So, and the helmet was made mostly by Felix and a little bit of help from Cornelius, who was my knight at the time. So
that surcoat is front and back.
Yes, yes. And it's, like I said, the ermine are all over it, front and back, on the quarters. And it's funny because I've been telling people who are doing their device for the first time, like, you want something that is easy to reproduce, because I got told, make sure you pick something that's easy to draw. And excuse my language for a moment, but I was like, fuck you, I can draw. So I did this. And now every time I have to reproduce it, I'm like, those stupid rayon-y flames. Why did I do this to myself?
And you will pay for it forever.
Right, exactly. And it looks good, but at the same time, I look at it and go, you know, I should have thought about my future self a little bit more.
I am so impressed with the Salé, because I mean, your vision can't be great in that.
It's funny, the Salé, because the ocular sits close enough to your eyes, you kind of learn to tune out the blackness around it, so you just see through the slit. But the problem is more if you get legged. As a shorter opponent already, you have to kind of arch your neck up to be able to see anything. And so that's really where my fighting was falling down. And certainly I think we swapped out to a bassinet with an open face in the year before I got knighted. Or, no, I swapped out just before literally Felix made me a helm for when I was knighted. And it's an open face bassinet and I haven't looked back yet. So But that Saleh is dead. It's cracking because it just has had so much battle wear.
So do you fight in wars with that helmet, that the closed face one?
I did when I wore it. I wore the Saleh all the time. And the worst part is in Lochac, we have different archery rules. So you have to wear mesh over your eyes and face as well. It's like putting a blindfold on over the ocular.
Well, you just tape it on?
You usually make a permanent mesh that has a strap and has nice leather around the edge, but you can tape it on. Certainly there are people that do.
Well, here we go back.
This photo is really special. It's my favorite. So this is the morning before the day I'm knighted. And this is the first and last time I got to fight Mark as knight and squire.
Oh.
So we're off to the pickup field. And I made that jupon specifically for my knighting. And so I sort of moved from doing the sort of throw over the top surcoat style to doing more garment based heraldic display as well. So that's again hand appliqued. I did not embroider the ermine spots on this one. I stenciled them. That's a bit of a cheat, but I only had so much time for this one. I couldn't take 3 years on this one.
All right.
But yeah, so this one's definitely my favorite. So this is the first Lochac La Providura back in, I think, 2010. I need to check that date. But one of the things that I thought would be really interesting to talk about was back when Felix and I were still like post-teenagers or teenagers, we watched a bunch of the videos, obviously, from the West Kingdom La Providura, and we went, that's a really cool tournament. Look at that. It's amazing. It's still out there. But we went, we really want something like that, but like here. So a friend of ours, Don Everard, had organized a couple of years before a thing called Rutan Symposium. So he had flown out Duke Paula Bellatrix and Duke Branos to come over and to teach a weekend seminar. And we had gone to that and had found it amazingly inspiring. And one of the things that we learned from that was if you want to ask somebody to teach, just reach out. The worst thing they can say is no. So the next time Everard wanted to do Rutan Symposium, I think he had a teacher that fell through. And one of the things that Felix is amazing at is he sort of scours YouTube to find inspirational fighters and just watches fighting nonstop. And although I didn't do a lot of that, I would always get to watch over his shoulder and go, oh, look at that. No joke. Check that out. So I'd been introduced to so many different styles. And one of the people I found hugely inspirational was Duke Havek from the West. So Everard went, I've had this teacher fall through, and I had heard that Havek is an amazing teacher, but we hadn't gotten to meet him at this stage. We had not gone to America yet. And I suggested, I'm like, there's this guy who fights with this teeny tiny shield. Maybe you could reach out to him. And weirdly, in a serendipitous way, we had organized that Everard would run Rutan Symposium in Inelgard, which is where we lived. And we had corresponded with Mari, Sir Mari, about the possibility of being allowed to use the name La Providura and run sort of a sister tournament here. And she had responded basically saying, look, we're not going to run another one here. How about you just take it? We want it to be a traveling tournament anyway. So we ended up running them back to back. So we had La Providura, and also serendipitously, we didn't even know that Mari had been Havek's squire. So when we reached out, we had a response for both. She went, I would love to come, and Havek would like to come, and we're happy for you to run the tournament. And when's it happening? So we ran it. And that was the first time that we had reached out and had a successful interaction that worked out better than we'd planned. And this is the field. So we had 30 fighters. It went for 6 hours. And the surrounding area that we ran it in was just glorious. And it was definitely a success. I was very, very young when I ran it, and I had some very specific ideas on the tournament was the main thing for me. So a lot of people have fond memories, but we ran it at a campsite, and I went, our group is small, everybody is kind of tired, so I don't want to ask anybody to cater it. So I had the campsite cater it, and the food was awful. Oh. But the feedback that I had, it was all like broiled, like watery chicken and awful things. But one of our local peers, Viscountess Ingrid, and I had spent literally a year making banners and making beautiful things to turn a basketball auditorium into a huge grand feasting hall. So it looked amazing. So the feedback I got was like, the tournament was amazing. The feast hall was amazing. Everything is so inspiring. The food was awful, but it's okay. So it keeps you humble. Cool. But that was why I included this, was because it was a really important moment for Felix and I, because you get to see that field of warriors come together. It was amazing.
Cool. Let's see.
So this is a funny one. This is me being a little bit cheeky. So I had a little bit of a spite project back in, I think, this was the year before I was not, so 2014. So this is at Roni Festival, and there is a tournament called the Heraldic Melee. So the Heraldic Melee is usually on the first day of Roni Festival, and it's a melee tournament where you have teams of 6 to 8, and it's a pageantry-driven tournament. This is before I'm a Laurel, before I'm a Knight. I'm currently a Baroness of our local group, but I sort of went, I'm so sorry, guys, I've already made this plan to fight with this other team, so I had to kind of leave my baronial team to the side. But at this point, I'd been making banners and surcoats and just oozing pageantry for a really long time. And the team that I was on, because of some of the contention of attitudes in the kingdom with particular people that were in my household at the time, we never won because it's always voting based. And it's supposed to be based on best heraldic display, best comportment on the field and courtesy, and slightly prowess based. So it's not the winner of the tournament based on prowess is not the winner. It's always judged by the populace. And I got a little bit bitter because I went, I'm making all these banners, I'm making all these surcoats, we have appropriate looking kits to a particular period and we never win. That's it. I'm just going to do something stupid. So I had a thought one year that I went, you know, superheroes have heraldry. They all have logos, and that's essentially heraldry and colors. So I'm just going to get a random ragtag bunch of people together, and I'm just going to form a team, and I'm going to make superhero surcoats and superhero banners. And Duke Edward, who is currently Captain America, or Captain Puerto Rico, because I made his surcoat look more like the traditional Captain America surcoat, which looks like Puerto Rico's flag. He painted his shield appropriately. And so I made all of those surcoats, with the exception of there is a Deadpool Waffenrock that my friend and brother, Sir Clement, had made mostly, and he sent it to me from, like, literally posted it so that I could do the guards because they have the little white spots, so it's appropriate for the Deadpool look. And we won that year. I mean, it was amazing. We had someone coordinate like music as well. So when we fought, there would be like theme songs, and I just went all out with it because I went, you know what? I'm not winning doing this seriously, so I'm just going to do what I want. And this was kind of before the superhero SCA fad kind of took off. So I'm not going to say I was doing it before it was cool, but also I did do this kind of before it was cool.
Nice. Nice. All right.
So that's the power of spite projects, just FYI. You can create amazing moments. So this is my knighting. I'm being dubbed here. It's self-explanatory, but there's a funny story with it, was that I had done an overnight vigil. I'd made a whole heap of banners and cool stuff and had this whole plan for how it was going to look in my mind. And then I did my vigil. Everything was great. I did a ritual bath in the morning, which was freezing. And I'd been told at that point, like, you've got a few hours, just go have like a 1 hour nap, because I'd been up for over 24 hours. And so I went to sleep and woke up and it was torrential rain.
Oh.
So we had planned, because I was the first woman knighted in my kingdom. So it was a big deal. Everybody wanted to be there. And so I had envisioned it outside on the village green. And that wasn't going to happen because the rain wasn't letting up. So again, another moment of, you know, the universe works out, but it also keeps you humble. So it's the same as like a wedding, you know, it never plays out 100% the way you think it will. And in this case, it didn't. But the amazing thing is we're in the tavern tent and the lighting is just amazing, and having all of those people actually so close, it's really moving when I think back.
Yeah. What was this at Roni as well?
Yes.
Yes. I think I have another. There you go. Is that the buffet?
That is my buffet photo. I like to include it because the buffet is very meaningful. I really think it's an important part of the ceremony, because it is that reminder that with great privilege comes great pain. And it is.
I love that. I've never heard that.
It's the reminder of humility. And it's funny, I asked for a backhand, and it's basically, Mark had a backhand. It is the more humiliating blow, and it is a period blow for the buffet. And King Yadai, who knights me here, he and his lady were doing a Mongolian reign, and they very, very generously decided to wear some of their Germans for it. And the thing was, we had been corresponding about it. I did a custom ceremony, and he had asked me, okay, so how do you want your buffet? And I said, I would like a backhand, please. I would like it firm. And he goes, so why the backhand? And I explained, and then I swear I saw him again a couple months later, and he caught me and he's like, okay, we're all set, but can I just ask you, why the backhand? Because I'm sure there's a buffet and then there's a backhand. So, but it was firm, but not debilitating. I got knocked to the side, but not knocked over. So that was good. But I feel that it's important to have that reminder of your humility on the path.
Can you tell us a little bit about the regalia you were gifted?
Yes, I was given a belt from Duke Havek via Sir Mari, who came to my ceremony, as she does for many of the female chivalry. I have a mismatched set of spurs. I have them here, actually. I got them. I don't know why I still have them on the table. But I was given a spur from Duke Draco of Jorvik and one from Duke Edward Steadfast. And one of the things that I'd read from the period sources is that a knight should be given spurs of gold to wear on your feet to remind you that gold should be kept far from the heart, so never to be covetous of wealth. But I also wanted a little bit of a feel of those were two of the people that really kept me grounded. So at times when everybody's blowing smoke up your backside because they all want to tell you how great you're doing, Draco and Edward were always there to go, you're doing fine, but let's keep working. And they would always give me that grounding. And then finally, I have this is the chain that I was knighted with. So this came from my knight, Duke Mark. And the interesting thing was the first trip that we took to California, we got to train with Mark at Havek's training sessions. And we didn't know each other very well at that point. I was a little bit scared, to be honest, because these are the people that we see on YouTube. And I nearly threw up the first training session we went on our first trip because I was so nervous. And at the end of the training, at the end of our trip before we left, we had one final fight night. And Mark had actually pulled Felix aside and said, if I could be so presumptuous, when she is a knight, I would like to give her a chain. Mm-hmm. He's talked about this chain on some of his interviews, and it's so moving. And of course, I should say, Felix could not keep that a secret. He told me on the plane ride on the way home.
It's exciting.
Yeah, and I mean, it's quite moving. And again, like, I just feel like I've had all of these weird serendipitous things, because with my first knight, Sir Philippe, he had a chain that was made by Duke Fabian for him. And he'd said, you know, my first squire to get knighted will get this chain. But of course, when I was knighted, I wasn't his squire. And so, you know, even though it's a, you know, it's a prestige thing being like, oh, Duke Fabian made that, because he was like a hero of our household and certainly a hero to us. And I went, that would have been really cool. Oh, well. But this chain was actually made by Fabian and given to Duke Connor, who gave it to Mark. And so in this weird, like serendipitous, like just chain of things, I've managed to be gifted a chain that was also made by Duke Fabian. So it's really kind of cool and very meaningful. He's an amazing person. So
that is super cool.
What about did you talk about your belt?
Oh, it was from Havek via Mari.
Oh, that's right. You did. That was the first thing. Sorry, my brain is.
No, that's all right.
So obviously you've been living with Felix, who was knighted before you, and you guys reigned once before you were knighted?
Yes, we reigned in 2013 when we were 23 years old.
Wow. How did knighting change your viewpoint of fighting or your role in the SCA, or maybe it didn't?
It's interesting. I don't feel like it changed too much of my viewpoint. I already had a fairly firm idea of what knighthood was and what it meant to me. It definitely compounds the need to try and represent those virtues. For me, I'm not a person of faith, but I do look at the chivalric virtues as like guidelines on how to be a better person and how to live your life in a conscientious way. And I was thinking about that a lot before I was knighted, but then when you are a member of the Order of Chivalry, it becomes your responsibility to embody and represent those virtues and to protect them. And that became probably more important to me. I always wanted to be a good person, but now I feel like I have something that I need to ensure that I protect.
Did you feel any pressure as the first woman knight in your kingdom?
Not necessarily. It's interesting because, oh wait, pressure. Yes.
Okay. I'm like, really? No pressure. Okay.
That's true. I was thinking about from a different angle, but yes, absolutely. I didn't feel it anymore after knighthood because it was always there. One of the things that I kind of lament on is for me as well, I'm very much based in a fighter's physicality is what's most important when you're training them. And again, I came up not realizing that it was weird for girls to like swords. So I've never felt like an other. It's always been other people's feelings of how special and how great that is that has really affected me. And the pressure that I feel isn't to be a better knight or to, you know, to necessarily be a better like role model, because I get a lot of people coming to me and telling me how great I'm doing because they want to be encouraging. But the pressure that I feel at that point is basically, you busted out of this tournament in 2 rounds, but you did so good. And I know they mean well, but that hurts because I know I didn't do well. I'm not delivering prowess on the field, and that's important. So there's almost like a lament about that. And certainly the pressure, it will be and is and has been to win a crown. So because people don't necessarily just want it for me, they want it for a woman. And so I feel like even though that is not important in my mind, I feel the pressure of other people wanting it so badly. And I know you spoke about this the other day, so don't feel bad, because I've had this my entire fighting career. It's always been, we didn't have any women before, so we really wanted a woman to get knighted. We didn't mind which one. Right. In some cases, people said that, and I went, yep, that's fine. That's to be expected. But I try, one of the things that I've talked about with Mark, actually, he helped me through this because he had said, you can't control what other people are going to be affected and inspired by. So don't let it get to you, just accept, and certainly I've learned to accept it in the way that it is meant, which is that they are excited for you and they are happy for you. But I try not to be burdened by it now. But I haven't fought a crown since 2018. So we'll see how that goes when we're allowed to have crowns again.
And are there more female knights now in your kingdom?
So we have Sir Leodin was made. We also had Mari who moved, and we have had one knight who has transitioned. So we actually have 4 female knights in the kingdom now.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. It normalizes it for other people, even if it never, because what you're passionate about never feels weird to you, yes. Right? Or unique or whatever. So it normalizes it for everybody else. That makes it an issue that you don't make it. So
absolutely. And I have kept it more in mind as well of it's been interesting getting to meet more of our sisters because there is a certain amount of joy that I felt in actually just getting to know other people in a relatable package. So in my entire fighting career, I mostly looked towards male fighters because I went, this Duke is amazing. I want to fight like him. And I haven't lost that, but there is something to be said for having those relationships and being able to talk to somebody else. And the amount of times that I've gone, I had that experience. Oh my gosh, and getting to relate on that level is really inspiring and important.
I love that over the last decade, it's been that women have supported each other more, and it's been less like competitive with each other, because maybe not for you in Australia, but you know, when you would have like women's tourneys at Estrella or Pennsic or whatever, it felt like this really weird kind of like there can only be one, and it's like, well, no.
Well, even when you would fight another like higher level female fighter on tier, it was like everybody would come around and like, oh, it's a bitch fight, you know, oh the you know, seriously, and I was just like, this is like piranhas or something. It was so weird.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it had a lot to do with that, I think, because the 90s were the time when you had like Underworld and what's the zombie one? Resident Evil, where there's always like one female character who's a badass. And not only is she the only woman who's badass, but she's better than all the men. I hate those kinds of films where you're like, so not only do I have to be the anomaly, but I also have to be better than everybody else. Like, yeah.
Or you're not legit.
Yeah. It's why I love the fact that we're now moving into like a much more healthy mass media where you have films that are about like groups of female badasses and you have lots of female representation, because it is important for people to see that.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, my daughter is 11, and this is probably not the best thing for her to be watching, but you know the Ocean's 11 films?
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of it, but there's one that's an all-female crew, and she watches that over and over again.
Don't worry, I watched horror movies when I was like a little kid, and I'm fine. So I'm sure she'll be fine.
It's not a bad movie. That's fine. You should let her watch that new Charlize Theron one.
Yes,
it's great, but I think it's too violent for her.
It is pretty violent.
She, you know, not because I'm censoring it, but she just does not like that kind of violence. She looks away. Yeah. So, in a few years.
So
anyway, sorry to sidetrack.
Do you wanna talk about reigning?
Yeah, we can talk about.
Okay, let me go back to the pictures, because I think those are the next ones.
I'm good for anything. I've got all day.
Okay.
It's only, midday here. So this is our first reign at our coronation. So I thought it was cute because we were so young, 23. And that was really quite terrifying. Felix has talked about winning his first crown, and it's really emotional for him. But he was going through a time where he just wasn't sure about his fighting. And from my perspective, I encouraged him to enter crown because he didn't know where he sat prowess-wise in the kingdom. And I thought, well, this will be a nice test. And I had always wanted to reign, so it kind of worked out best for me. But, you know, I think it's one of the reasons that we are so tight as a couple is because reigning is really a relationship accelerant. So being able to learn lessons on that level was really important. And now it means that we know each other so much better and can work through pretty much anything, I feel.
So
That's
let's
like
talk
trial
about
by fire.
Yeah, let's talk about this dress. Did you make this dress?
I did not. This was
Okay.
made by my very lovely friend, Mistress Ursula von Memmingen. And it was funny because she and I knew each other beforehand, but when Felix won crown, I instantly went, I want her to be my mistress of the wardrobe because her work is exquisite. And I have some nice clothes. Hers are amazing. And I knew that she would do an amazing job, but this gown exceeded all of my expectations. I think there's 8 meters of silk taffeta in the skirt. It's beautiful, fully lined crown neck. I am a lot smaller there than I am now, so I can't fit it in anymore, which is really sad.
It fits beautifully.
The gown served me so well as well, because I knew when we had an event that there would be something difficult to do, I would make sure that I wore that gown so that I was like this pillar of authority. Somebody had to listen to me.
It's your power suit.
Exactly.
So you said that you had wanted to reign. How was reigning in actuality different than what you thought it was going to be?
So much more difficult. It is a huge privilege, but when people talk about the weight of the crown, they are not making it up. It is one of the most difficult but rewarding experiences that you can have. And especially doing it as a couple, it makes it different to, being the CEO of a company or whatever, because you have this level of, you have a job that you need to do, but you're also expected to be inspirational during that time. And so we had to deal with politics that was difficult, and certainly that was very trying for me because I like to make everyone happy. And so there was a point that I had to learn that sometimes you have to do the right thing. That's not the easy thing. And at that point, you also have to realize that if you're in the public eye, there are going to be some people that don't like you just because they don't like you. And that's okay. You have to move forward and do the best and most conscientious job that you can to do what's best for the kingdom. So this is our second coronation. I wanted to throw this in because I'm so proud of the coat hardies. We had some assistants making these. So from Sir Mari helped me get some of the applique done with the stars. My apprentice, Mistress Finn, embroidered all the roses for mine. And Felix's mother actually did all of the buttonholes, which she always likes to remind me was very difficult, which I totally get. That's why I didn't do it. But I worked on constructing the gowns once they were embellished correctly. So I just thought one of the things in Lochac that's interesting is we're kind of so far away from a lot of the heavy traditional kingdoms. And a lot of our traditions come from the West Kingdom. New Zealand was part of Caid for a long time, but they've come into Lochac, so they have a slightly different flavor. But we're very West Kingdom flavored. But over the years, because once we went kingdom, we didn't have people coming to visit as often and sort of reinvigorating that tradition. It feels sometimes like you make it, each reign kind of makes up a new thing as they go along. And so in our second reign, it was really important for us to pull it back to, this is Lochac and this is our tradition. So we used standard ceremonies. We actually backdated to some older ceremonies as well because we liked them better. And we wore the kingdom colors as often as possible. And 14th century is great for that because you can do heraldic garments and your surcoats and jupons will be heraldic. So we made sure that we wore the kingdom arms because that was what was important to us.
So pretty.
Thank you. And I wanted to throw this one in because Felix is so sweet. So he won his second crown and he, during the wreathing, proposed to me. So we've been together at that point for 11 years. And although I thought maybe I would get married one day, I kind of was just complacent and going, we're never getting married. It's fine. I don't really care. That's okay. And it turned out that he had a plan for something like 5 years that he wanted to win a crown and propose during the wreathing. And he had entered a previous crown that he unfortunately didn't win 2 years beforehand. And he had it planned for then, but because it didn't happen, he didn't do it. And of course, Mark, afterwards, we were talking and he's like, so if you had lost, were you gonna flake out of it? And he goes, oh yeah, I was gonna wait until I won. Like, you made me wait 2 extra years. So yeah, during the wreathing, he asked me to marry him and I accepted. And you can see, I love like the look on everyone's face in the background is they were so surprised, as was I. I feel bad. In hindsight, I watched the video of it and I was so stunned that it took me probably a full 30 seconds to say yes, because what I instinctively said was, are you kidding me? Are you joking me right now?
I love the look on the king's face. That is incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think then we go into your art, maybe.
Yeah. So this was my laureling. And it was it's funny. So everyone here is decked out in Germans at my request. And I know that they all love me very much because the day was like 40 degrees Celsius or 45. So hot, over 100 degrees. And they all got in their Germans just for my ceremony.
Is that the Legacy Laurel cloak?
That is.
It's beautiful.
Gorgeous. So that was, the cloak is perpetual. So each new member of the order gets to wear it on their laureling day. And I especially love the gold work on the collar. It's, I think Lochac me ficit, or some way around, but it's Lochac made me.
Oh,
it's gorgeous.
I love that. Yeah, when Mari and I were talking to Rowan, she was telling me all about it, and I just think that is the best tradition.
It really is. And she's amazing. She's my hero. I don't understand how she just has endless enthusiasm to start the SCA in a country and then still be the head of a couple of, different groups and, guilds. She's just amazing.
So did you make your Germans here?
So I made the shorts and Mari made the Unterarm that I'm wearing. And so this is me just after my knighting, and it was at another Lochac La Providura. So during this period, I reigned as Baron and Baroness Baroness with a Baron for our local group, just shortly after I'd stepped down as Queen. And I didn't reign with Felix. I actually served as Baroness alongside my friend Master Yevon, who is now Sir Mari's partner. So again, the circle continues. But I actually had never really wanted to be a Baroness, but Yevon desperately wanted to be Baron. And I thought that I could help him because he can sometimes be a little rough around the edges. So I thought if I'm there to help him, then we'll both help the group and nurture that. And so we stood up together. And at this particular La Providura, we had invited a duke from the West Kingdom for all of them. But at this particular year, we had invited Duke Radnor because we would do La Providura and then there would be a week of teaching after. But Radnor had been injured at that time and he couldn't make it out. So we had postponed his visit. And one of the traditions that we started for La Providura and Lochac is that we would almost have a sermon to chivalry at the start. So it started with the first Duke Havek had said words that were so inspiring and moving that I went, I want to keep this rolling. So at the second, we asked Duke Mark to come and teach, and he had given his sermon to chivalry, which was amazing. And then we got to the third, and we didn't have a visiting Duke. And I basically had the privilege of being able to deliver the speech myself, just thinking, that I'm the local Baroness. If anybody's going to do this, I've just been knighted, I may as well have a go. And it was like standing on the shoulders of giants. I think I did a good job. But it was just amazing. And so many people responded so well. And it just really moved me on the day and uplifted me.
Super cool. That's a hard act to follow.
Yes. So I wanted to throw in Felix's jupon. So this is what I was talking about before in terms of moving from a throw-over surcoat with embellishment to full garments. So this is, of course, a 14th century jupon. It's lightly quilted. So because we're in Australia, it's really hot. So even this garment is fairly warm. So you don't want to do the full traditional Black Prince jupon style wadding packed garment. It's just too much. But I hand appliqued this, and I made this for Felix's laureling so that he could be in his arms for the ceremony. And I'm really proud of it, especially because Felix and I only fight about 3 things. We fight about fighting, we fight about money, which all couples do, and then we fight about sewing, because I have a really hard time articulating what I'm trying to do when I'm patterning, and he gets very frustrated with that. And one of the things is he has a particular eye because he's a jeweler as well. So he can see if things are like a millimeter off. And because his device has those chevrons, what happened was I constructed the whole thing. And then he looked at it, he goes, but the chevrons don't match at the side. And I've gone, yeah, but who's going to be looking at your sides? He's like, but it's not right. I've gone, oh. So I've like screamed at the walls and then taken it and fixed it. But you know what? He was right. It does look a lot better with the chevrons matching at the sides.
I have the opposite problem with my husband. He can never articulate what he wants, and so I'm kind of left guessing and hoping that it's coming close.
So
I wanted, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, you sent these photos, and I'm just like floored by your shields. Like, they're incredible.
Thank you. I spent a long time doing them, and I think later on you'll see like a full timeline that I wanted to throw in so you could see that there was a progression, because what I got laureled for was pageantry and heraldic display. So it was kind of bits and pieces of everything, but it usually all relates back to fighting accoutrements. And I wanted to throw these in because these are actually kind of the turning point for when I took my shield painting from like a cartoony style to a much more period influenced style. So the one on the left is based on Hans Mammeling's Last Judgment Triptych. So this is the centerpiece. And I looked at it and I loved the imagery so much that I did like a kind of knockoff of it. But rather than having like bold outline, cartoony kind of feel, I tried my best to blend and get the colors right and get the feel right. And certainly it's not perfect, but it was really, really a step forward for me in terms of looking at it. And what I'm doing with my shields as well is that they're not sort of coming out of the ether of, I'm just going to put a picture on the shield. I, at this stage, was obsessed with the parade shields with the knight bowing to his lady, kneeling in front of his lady. I believe it's in the Met. So it's the you or death imagery. And I loved that. And I got really into looking at pageantry pageantry shields. And so one of the things that I was doing is I would paint these shields, but I would also fight with them. So I included my harness photos so that you could see that I'm actually using the shield that I've painted. The Last Judgment Triptych shields I didn't use for that long because I unfortunately had painted it over leather, and so it started cracking right away. But I actually didn't like that shield very much, so it was not meant to be.
So
now, exactly. And then the shield on the right is based more on the late 15th, early 16th century German pavises. And I became obsessed with patron saints. So our first household was the White Company of St. Michael. So there was St. Michael imagery everywhere. I became completely obsessed with it. But the way of painting it was less of like just putting a beautiful 15th century oil painting onto it and actually going, okay, well, this is based off of a period design. They use the lettering around the outside. And then you would have a patron saint, and it just fit perfectly. And that shield, if you can see in the top right, got obliterated. It was a aluminium Pavis, and that lives with Mark now, because when I left the States, I went, well, I'm not taking this with me because I can't use it anymore, so you can have it.
Very cool.
Those are next level. They're just beautiful. Oh, wow.
So this is the timeline, and I'm really sad that you can't see the 2015 shield down the bottom. I actually don't have that many good photos of it, but that's a family portrait, and it's done much more in the high Gothic 15th century Renaissance style. But I wanted to include this because I started in 2007 just dabbling in painting shields, and so the top row are all fairly cartoony, but they all, with the exception of the very first one that I painted for Felix, all have a period source that I'm referencing. So whether it be an illumination or a painting, I always wanted to make things look appropriate to the time and the style that I was working in. Even if it did look cartoony, it was at least based on something. And I feel like that served me fairly well in terms of color choice, and certainly later on in terms of blending and how to make it look appropriate.
Okay, I have to stop you for a second, because that is not cartoony. I know that you progressively get a lot better and like more sharp and more like high art, but that is not cartoony. So
thank you.
Let's just throw that out the window.
It's more, I was saying this to you in text earlier, that this really made me go back and see the large amount of stuff that I'd produced. And I thought it was only fair to see like where I started. And certainly there's complexity there, but I can pick all of the faux pas in it. So
always your harshest critic.
We all are.
So tell me about this 2021. What is that? It's hard to see. Small.
That was a commission piece that was, I was commissioned to paint it for Sir Fatima in Glenarvan. So one of her squire brothers had asked me when she was put on vigil to paint her a shield, because I'd met him at an event here in Lochac way back, and he said he admired my work and asked if I would do it. And I went, absolutely, that sounds amazing. But I wouldn't have it done for the knighting. And then even worse, Felix won crown right in the middle of me painting it. So put on the back burner. But it went to her this year. And that one was interesting because rather than working in the high Northern Renaissance style, I decided to try and match her style. So she does Middle Eastern. She has an amazing harness. So I had to do a little bit of research and specifically wanted to make it look more in the Persian art realm. So I referenced a few different designs through illumination for the outer parts of the shield, and some more pictorial illumination for that centerpiece. But that is a portrait of her in her armor. And all of the gold in the floral work and in the chain is all gold leaf.
Is that big for you guys? Is that working?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
That's amazing. I'm really drawn to Eastern art, so thank you for making that one big, because it's beautiful.
It's beautiful. And I'm looking at the portrait too. That's super cool.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really proud of that one, but I didn't get very many photos of it before. What happens is, actually looking back through a lot of these, I went, oh, I did do that, because I've made so many things for other people. They just go and I forget that I've done them.
You know, when I was putting my stuff together too, I did the same thing. I'm like, wow, I've painted a lot of shields. Like,
yeah,
you just forget.
Yeah, absolutely. And because they're ephemeral, which is actually what I like about using the shields on the field, is that yes, they have beautiful artwork on them, but at the same time, that's the opulence of tournament is really something that I'm drawn to. So of course I'm going to hand embroider my surcoat, because I want to have that opulence on the field and that nobility. So, you know, you use a shield, it's ephemeral, it's only meant to be for a short time.
I am 100% with you there. Like, especially since both of us are so passionate about fighting. You know, you spend a big chunk of your time at events in your kit. And why wouldn't you make it look the best? And even if it's going to get destroyed, and they are, so what? You make another one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I love that you do that. Let's look at these. These are incredible too.
So this I made in 2014. So Mark, my knight, started a discussion group that he was doing online and at events called the Companionship of St. Thaddeus. So the whole idea of the companionship is that you discuss the chivalric virtues and how they can be used within the SCA and in your everyday life, essentially to attempt to be a better person. And so I thought, well, he's going to be running these meetings. It would be nice for them to have a banner that they could meet under. And this, I think, was the first time that I had attempted to actually apply gold leaf to silk. So I spent a long time, and you'll see in some of the later slides, like I started doing silk painting relatively early on, and I did a lot of it. But it's all, yeah, there's some of it.
Wow.
So that's some of the later stuff too. But
essentially
stuff? That's the later stuff.
Okay.
So yeah, so there you go. That's the early stuff. So this was all pretty much like in the 2010 to 2013 period. So I did a lot of the silk resist painting. So essentially it's lots of people do it now. You stretch the silk and then you have your resist you put down for the lines, and then you use dye to fill in those areas while it's stretched. And it's really fun, but it's really easy to mess up. But from my research, eventually I found it's not really period to medieval Europe. But as soon as I accepted that and went, the thing is that what I'm more interested in is less the chemistry of the art and more of the pictorial design and the aesthetic. And that kind of served me for a long time. So that's like the first parade style shield that I did for myself. My first surcoat, which had all of the ermine spots were hand embroidered. So I was still pretty keen even early on, but it just took me forever to do anything. And my first piece of, not my first piece of embroidery, but my first piece of gold work, I did a little 15th century Burgundian style livery badge, which is the little fire striker down the bottom. And the guys in the household loved those cornets so much, the banners, that I ended up doing tons of them. I don't even know how many I've done at this point because I did so many.
So should I go back to the other pictures?
That sounds great. Sorry, I threw that in because I did start doing a lot of stuff to get the whole picture together fairly early because that was what was important to me.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah, there we go. Okay,
cool. So I did the St. Thaddeus banner, and it's heavily detailed because one of the things that I found in my research was that because pageantry and knightly tournament culture became such a big deal, especially in the 14th and 15th centuries, people were trying to outdo each other. They wanted to look opulent on the field. They wanted to show their wealth. But at the same time, really a lot of the hand appliqued and sewn banners were really expensive to produce. So one of the things that you would see is you actually do have a lot of examples of painted banners from the 15th and 16th centuries. And there's one example from Ghent that is actually a fully painted lady with, you can see brocade in her gown. It's called the Lady of Ghent banner. It's painted onto silk. And by the 15th century, they were using oil paint. So the level of detail you can get is the same as what they're painting onto panels. And so I decided that I would start doing that, but I was going to do it through my resist silk work, because even though, it might be more appropriate to paint onto silk taffeta and to use oils, they don't last that long. Like, paint it's sturdy and it'll crack. And to be honest, when you're flying everywhere, having a lightweight thing that you can just pull out, it weighs nothing, and they're durable. That's the thing about the resist silk, is that you can literally scrunch it up into a ball, throw it in your fighting bag, and then you can pull it out and it's still going to look amazing next time you use it. So I started to do more of this, still referencing period artwork and designs, but I found that you can water down the dye, you can mix colors. So I started to really try to push the aesthetic that I could get from them. And on the far left was a project that I did. I was commissioned by Duchess Constantia to actually paint a series of pennons for our roses. This was before I reigned, so probably 2011, 2012. And each one of the figures in the hoists of the banners are a different Lady of the Rose for the time. There's a lot more now.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And then this is when I started to try and push into a little bit more of a period banner zone, because my good friend, Mistress Ursula, who I mentioned before, was our Mistress of the Wardrobe. When she was made a laurel, I think I offered to make the banner for her, but I wanted to do something really special and really period. So knowing that I'd found lots of resources for banners on silk taffeta, and they utilized silk, gold leaf, I decided to try that. So I mocked this all up. So it is a lightweight silk taffeta, and I gold leafed the entire design and then painted over the leaf to give that that detail. So you see this more, it's more of a Burgundian style 15th century. And the thing that I really like about this style, rather than, I did just fall into doing that style, but the thing that kept me coming back was just that beautiful literary text work and the scroll work. And it just has always kept me coming back to that style.
It's so beautiful. I love the fringe all around it. That's why I had to like zoom in.
I was going to ask about the fringe. Tell me about the fringe.
So unfortunately, the fringe is just store-bought fringe. I do not weave, although I've been told that I should get into it because it's fun. But that was one of the things that I had to figure out as well. And I had to really dig deep. And while I was researching a lot of this stuff, I did contact museums and go, can you just get me a photo of? Because with the Burgundian style, they're all very specific. You see there's a patron saint in the hoist. There's generally heraldic badges rather than full devices placed through the body of the banner. And there's usually a central text. So it'll be a small motto, which is what I've attempted to reconstruct here. But they had these fringes. And so I think when you look at the illustrations, because a lot of the time you don't actually have the extant item to look at, they're very rare because they were carried in war, so they don't live very long. But the extant examples, you usually see an illustration of them, or you see a photo that's grainy, you have no idea what's going on. So I eventually found some really good examples that actually show that it is an adhered fringe. So it's a fringe that's sewn to the edge, because if we go back to the St. Thaddeus banner, that one I experimented with going, well, silk frays, so maybe I can just fray the edges and then paint that. And that took forever.
Yeah.
So, and this is much more effective.
So how does this look in the wind as compared to the resist technique?
So the silk is much heavier, so it does not fly as well. That's one of the other advantages to the silk resist technique, is that you can do on such a low weight habitat that it just flies beautifully and carries on any breeze. Whereas I haven't found a silk taffeta that is light enough to get the same effect. So it's a bit heavy, but in a stout breeze, it'll fly.
So I'm going to interrupt you just for a second, because all of your photos are giving me all these great ideas to keep me busy during quarantine. So thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. That's the one thing. Quarantine is awful, but at the same time, it's given me a lot of time to dedicate to art. So I've been very thankful for that, because I know I'm not very old, but at the same time, I started to get into a melancholy last year because I went, I don't have enough time in my lifetime to make all the things I want to make.
Yeah,
so I've had a bit of time to catch up.
I'm right there with you. Like our mom died 7 years ago, and one of the worst things was going through her stash of art materials and thinking of all the things she didn't make. And then I looked down in mine, and I'm like, I don't ever want anyone to have to go through that. I got to make this stuff. So
yes.
Yeah. All right. So tell us about this.
So this is one that I wanted to include because I'm very proud of it. It's a collaborative work that was done within the barony while I was Baroness. And so I worked on it as well as my now apprentice, Mistress Finn and Mistress Ingrid, who was the lady that I made all the crazy banners with back in the day for La Providura. And we worked fairly hard on this. And what this is it's Lochac's first war cloak. So one of the things that Felix and I were really inspired by when we went to the West Kingdom, because we would always go for June Crown, and then everyone would go, oh my gosh, if you were here for one more week, you could go to West Antier, and it's really cool, and this happens, and this happens. And they told us about the war cloak. And this is after we've reigned, so we're starting to think a little bit more on a kingdom level of how to try and encourage things that we want to see and want to inspire people. So we really loved that tradition of giving away a beautiful cloak to a warrior on the war fields, because one of the things that I think is that even though war is fun, it really is something that is, for a knight especially, war is the moment that you give back to the kingdom, because you have to be there to make it so. If there's less of us, war is less fun. If there's more of us, war is amazing. So we really wanted to create something to recognize the heroes on the war field. So this was made in 2015. So the year I was knighted was the first year that it was given. And that tradition has continued. So Felix and I got to give one away last year, and I told him it was going to happen because I got so emotional that I cried so hard that my voice broke. And I'm sure that nobody really understood why I was so emotional, but it really was just such a moving moment to be able to be a part of that again.
That's cool. Super cool. All right, I think there's one more photo. Yeah.
Cool. And so this was made fairly recently. So I made this piece. So now I'm pretty much dabbling. So I still do banners and I still paint shield. Actually, no, I haven't painted a shield since the one for Sir Fatima this year, because my squire paints my shields now. Lucky me.
Nice.
But I've been dabbling a little bit around the place, because one of the things that I'm really inspired by is really pictorial interpretations of different mythologies or different stories. And that's what I liked about doing the parade shields, is that it's about really trying to encapsulate the person who has it in a picture and putting in cool details. So I've been a little bit inspired by Norse artwork recently. And I went to one of my favorite events, Spring War, and they have a tradition that's very similar to the war cloak, which is so cool. They call this award the Iron Serpent. So every Spring War, there's a recipient of the Iron Serpent, and it's the most inspirational fighter on the war and tournament field at Spring War. And I was very fortunate to have received this in 2018. So the tradition is that the recipient makes the token for the next recipient. So being that it takes place in the barony of Mordenvale, and they have a very stout sort of Norse tradition. So I went, okay, I'm going to do something that's more Dark Ages. It's not a perfect extant period reproduction piece, but I think it's pretty cool. So the hanger is actually a fire striker. So I thought the imagery of something that sparks a flame for a warrior of note was really cool.
I love that.
Super cool.
That's really cool.
I love that you're dabbling in other things. I think that it's important for people to know that Laurel's try new things too, right?
Yeah.
Like, always learning.
Yeah, I came from we do so much. We've moved around all over the place. I'm not a persona person. Like I like to wear different things, but I still want it to encapsulate the whole outfit. And especially like I've been doing some embroidery recently that's based on the Mammeling cloak, which I know is quite common to see. But then I've been listening to a lot of the Poetic Edda on podcasts, and I went, this is so cool. I want to make this story into garments. So I've done like some embroidery with, I did like a little Valkyrie design and a little Odin design with his ravens and just the one-eyed faces. So the Mammeling cloak face, but just doing it with one eye. So, and just playing with it.
I remember seeing that, and I loved that you took the design and you made it your own. It was super cool.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and I think just like knighthood, getting laureled isn't the end of your path. It's kind of just the beginning.
Absolutely.
And you can kind of take it, you can either take it as, oh my God, now I have to be the perfect laurel of the thing that I got laureled for, or you can take it as having the freedom to do whatever you want, because now you don't have to be on that strict path anymore. So
that's it. And with my laureldom, I quite often joke that I'm a bad laurel, because I kind of like, I still make the stuff that I got laureled for, but most of the time people don't really know what it is, because it's pageantry. Like, that could be anything. And so someone will come to me for garment advice, and I'm like, I'll advise you, but you should know this isn't my thing. But that is a common trope, I think. I think you may have spoken about it previously, where you said once you become a laurel, people think you're a laurel for everything. I had someone ask me about like 16th century Persian, and I went, this person could talk to you about that, but I don't know. Like, I'm not a garment person.
So Sir Mari says that you need to show us the sleeve of the dress you're wearing.
Ah, okay. Well, here we go. So I did this.
Oh my God.
For my step down as Baroness. So the Swabian style, which is German, 16th century for this one. They did a lot of asymmetric designs. So they would do these highly like bejazzled sleeves, but they would only do it on one side. And I really liked that. And the style is very nice and flattering. It's actually, so this gown I made, but Mistress Ursula, who she specializes in Swabian, like guided me through the whole process. But one of the cool things is, you know, they loved using spangles and beads and pearls and just all of this stuff. And so I decided to do, again, the telling a story through pictures. So I think the image that I referenced this from had a banner running through, and it had lovely flowers that were kind of nondescript. And I went, well, I can do a white belt, and I can put the white roses, and kind of went from there. So one day I want to do another one, but I want to do my tattoo.
I love that. That's right up my alley. Are those like metal pants? I don't know how you.
They're spangles.
Yeah, they're spangles. They're very cool. Super cool. Now I want to make that dress, but in for me.
You should. It'll be amazing.
I want that to be like by the end of quarantine, you've got a dress made for yourself.
Yes.
Well, only if you help me pattern. Like, we'll have to do a Zoom session, because I am not good at patterning.
Okay, so I don't know anything about that style.
So maybe I'll Zoom with Mari and Ava.
The nice thing about Swabian is they have like pleats up the front, so if you eat a lot, it can expand.
Oh, well, that's perfect for me.
It's good for me.
We all go through that bloat time of the month. Yes.
Someone wants to know what your tattoo is.
Oh, so you won't be able to see it, but I have a sleeve that I'm working on. So I have a half sleeve that it is a nest with birds, and there's actually banner work that has the chivalric virtues on them. And then on my forearm, I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but I have an interpretation of the Black Prince effigy.
That's cool.
Wow.
So it's working on it. I have lots of gaps, but I can't go and see my tattoo artist right now. So
none of us can.
I feel like I've been dominating the questions.
Oh, I just asked one. I'm good.
Right. Well, I'm wondering what are your big goals or things that you want to accomplish in the SCA still? I mean, you're so young and you've already done so much. So what do you want to do?
I would like to win a crown in my own right, or two. That would be nice. But really just to be the best combatant that I really can. Like, I want to try and push my own boundaries. Becoming proficient in a different weapon would be good. But a lot of where I'm aiming as well, outside of fighting, is really in just trying to create fun for other people. So that's really my main goal, is to try and bring the fun as much as possible and nurture that environment, because I think that's something that, especially right now, it feels like we kind of lose a lot of simplicity, which makes things more complicated. So it means it's harder to attract new people to staying if everything is kind of bureaucracy and angst. So I'm trying to bring back the fun as much as I can, and that's what I'd like. You know, I'm not a huge like drinker party person, but I will run a party and give booze away to make sure that other people will have a good time.
We're not much drinkers either, but I would do the same thing, because I think sometimes we get lost so much in the serious stuff that we forget that this is supposed to be, for most of us, our vacation, and vacations are supposed to be fun. And especially now with just online and all the angst right now, like we sure could use some fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it's important to uphold the serious stuff, but it's also, you know, all things in moderation. Sometimes you have to allow yourself to have a good time. You can still make sure that no bad things happen whilst you allow people to just sort of live in that dreamscape.
Well, and look what you did with your whole superhero thing for that that tournament. You decided that you're going to have fun, and boom, you won. Right? It's contagious.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, do you have any philosophical questions, Shaxi? We've been going for a while, so maybe we should look at her sword.
Yeah.
Okay, let's look at your sword.
Okay, I should say I feel very privileged to show my sword because I haven't won a crown, so I've been watching all the dukes and I'm like, are you sure you want to see my sword? It's going to look like all the others, but you never know. So I have my sword. So it's 35 inches. It is minimum, so the 32 mil, inch and a quarter. I use as light a stick as I can create power with. So very similar to my knight. I have a little donut in the grip because I do have a thrusting tip. So that's just there to make sure I don't jam my fingers. Thrusting tip, low profile. And yeah, it's pretty much.
And how tall are you?
I am 5'8".
Okay.
So I think standard, maybe a little taller than average.
You're taller than me, but I'm short. So
yeah,
you're shorter than me, but I'm tall.
It was funny because I presented with Duke Mark and Duke Thorfinn in a class for known world fighter practice, and then when I started looking at average heights, I went, oh, I'm actually like average to a little above average for women here, and I went, but everyone I fight is taller than me, so I still have cred.
You know what's really funny though is like, if you're like me, like I never feel short in armor until I see a picture of me standing next to everybody else. I just feel the same.
Yep. I have one of my favorite photos of me fighting is against our current king, Sir Theodoric, and he's huge, like 6'6", 6'7", maybe. He's I don't know his height, but he's very tall. And I was doing like a weird bending thing, and he also is, but it's like almost monstering over the top, and it's amazing because it's the first time I've looked and I was like, oh, I am small. I'm not big. In my mind, when I fight, I think I'm huge.
Well, me too. I mean, I think that's part of what is so wonderful and freeing about fighting is that you can forget like everything anybody's ever told you about what your size can or cannot let you do, and you can just be you, and you can be fierce, and you can be the warrior that you've trained to be.
Absolutely.
And you don't have to worry about if your butt looks big.
Someone wants to know what the donut is made of in your handle.
It is just closed cell foam with leather stitched around.
I might have to do that because every once in a while when I thrust, my thumb will come out. Like,
yes.
It's not supposed to, but it wants to help guide it. And I always end up breaking my nails.
I was going to nag you to do that.
One of the things I've thought about with thrusting to stop that, because I know that jams my thumb, is actually to think about like sticking the knuckle out further rather than the thumb out. But that's just because ergonomically the tip wants to come out with the thumb out. Like, but yeah, it's not good for us.
No. So I think we should do the final 10 with you. What do you think? Yeah, I think we should.
Would love to.
All right. If you could fight anyone in the world, who would it be?
So this is really funny. Remember how I said serendipitous things? I had no idea that Ashaksi was married to Optimus Ares, but he would be one of the people that I would want to fight, because he's one of the people that Felix goes, look at this guy fight. That's amazing. I'm like, that is cool. He looks like a lot of fun. So that would be my answer.
I have to tell you that he is Zoom Pell practicing with somebody from Lochac. I'm not sure who it is. Every night they Zoom Pell practice.
Oh my gosh, I want to know who that is now. They should DM me.
Is that in addition to the Kaid practice, or has he switched?
It is the Kaid practice. It's someone from Lochac that's in with I'm blanking on his name. Helgi's practice from Kaid. Yeah. So
no joke.
Cool.
Well, when we're allowed to travel again one day, you can let him know that I want to fight him.
He would love that. Yeah. He would love that.
You would love it. He is amazing. He's amazing. Awesome. All right. Who would you like to see reign in your kingdom?
I would like to see, so some good friends of ours, Sir Catan and his wife, Mistress Alicia. So we've been friends with them for so long. And Catan is a demon of a fighter. And they have 2 little girls. So that's kind of, I think, downgraded the intent to win crown for a while. But I know he's going to be entering again. So I would love to see them reign. They're just amazing people.
Cool. If you could talk stick with anyone in the world for an hour, who would it be?
I'm super fortunate that I get to talk to Mark every week, so he's on the list. But I would love to spend time speaking with Duke Uther, His Majesty Duke Uther. We got to fight him when we went to West Antier, which was awesome. And I tune in for everything that he does, because his mind is just so amped for fighting. And I think that would be amazing.
Yeah, he reigned up here, and the theme of his reign was best summer ever. Like every time, best summer ever. Anyway.
He influenced a lot of the way that I wanted to portray myself in court in our second reign, because we went for 2018 West Antier, and I was so sad that you weren't there. By the way, you didn't know, but I was sad.
I didn't know. I can't remember what came up, but I was trying to think the other day, because we went in 2019. Yeah. So next time you're out, or maybe Kellen and I have been talking about going to Roweny. So we'll see if we can make that happen. If the world lets us make it happen.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Okay. What is your favorite medieval-esque or period movie?
I thought about this for a while, just in case. I'm going to say, I watched A Knight's Tale twice last week, just to see if it was a terrible movie or a good movie. That one's good. I cried in the knighting scene, and I think anyone who reaches the accolade will understand this, but it was because when I watched it young, I was like, oh, he gets knighted, that's cool. But then now I'm just like, his body was broken, and he took such a beating for her, and the Black Prince saw that people love him, and that made me cry. So that's definitely it. But I also love Army of Darkness. I don't think anybody else has said that one. Have you seen that one?
So if you could add a rule to the rules of the list, or subtract one, what would it be?
That is a good question. It's kind of already there in the you should treat everyone in a knightly and courteous manner, but I would also add treat others as you would want to be treated.
Boom.
Because I think that would avoid a lot of issues. Like, would you like someone to not acknowledge your blow? No? Okay, well.
Great. I think, I think most of us are out there doing that, and the people that aren't, it's a very stark contrast.
Yeah, so, anyway. Absolutely. I agree with you.
What is your favorite tournament format?
I really love Valhalla tournaments. So I'm not sure if you've experienced those before. So that one is a Grand Malay style, and it is essentially you have single fights, and then whoever wins stays on the field, whoever is bested leaves. and they stay on the sidelines until the person who bested them is killed, and then they get to come back on. So the winner of a Valhalla tournament is the person who literally kills everyone consecutively. Because what will happen is you'll probably have 2 or 3 people that are dominating a field, and then one of them gets killed, and then suddenly 10 people come back on, and it's amazing to watch from the sidelines. It can be a little confusing if you've not done it before, but it gets you so much fighting.
How does it ever end?
You have to have somebody has to last it out. I've had some that we've stopped due to time, but I have seen one that played out with, you know, a few nights on the field, and it's literally whoever has the best endurance usually has a good leg up. But if you have a couple of like well-honed knights on the field, you might just have to stop it and not declare a winner.
I'm gonna have to try that sometime. That sounds pretty cool.
It's pretty fun.
Yeah. What's your favorite event?
My favorite event locally is one called Great Northern War. So it happens on a long weekend in Brisbane in Queensland, so top part of the kingdom. They start off the Friday night. They have a Ring of Fire tournament. So they have a rig where they have gas lit fires around the whole list field. And so it's amazing. You get to fight with fire everywhere. And then it's pretty much just, you know, after that 3 days of war and drinking with your friends, and they have a free tavern, and it's just amazing. I have so many friends up there as well. So that one's definitely my favorite by far.
How do they do the Ring of Fire?
So good, but I need to go on another year to really get a feel for it.
How do they do the Ring of Fire with like fire restrictions? How does that work?
It's usually in June. So the seasons for us are swapped. So June is in winter. So there's not usually too many fire restrictions at that time in that area, luckily. And they do it with gas, like propane gas fires. So
you turn it off.
They have a tubing system that has little holes in it, and they turn the fire on, light them all, and then they can turn it off. And it's nice and safe.
Thank you. I'm just curious.
I'm not sure our fire restrictions would ever allow that, but
I don't think so either.
It's cool though. If you could have any helmet in the world, regardless of cost, what kind would it be? You probably already have it.
No, so I mentioned before that Felix and I might do like a little collaboration soon. In fact, we will, because when we start to collaborate, it eventually happens. But one of the things that I really like is one of the Vendel style helms with the plaques with all the different characters. I think they were punched, but we're trying to figure out the best way of doing that, but in a fighting helm. So that is what I would really like, is one of those heavily ornate plaque helms.
Well, you guys should PM or DM or whatever you want to call it, Ugo or Vren, because
yes.
I made a ton of them, and I know that they would talk to you guys about it.
Yeah, and I'm interviewing Vren in a couple weeks on one of my Tuesday interviews.
So
he's really cool, so you should check it out.
I follow their work actually, but I'm always like a little, even though I just said reach out to people, they'll talk to you, there is like a little fangirl part of me with other artists. It's like, oh, I should. He's just released one that's gorgeous.
Yeah, he is a super nice guy.
Yeah,
super nice.
Yeah, Vren is very humble and very approachable.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, it's Saturday morning at Estrella, and several people want to talk to you about last night. What did you do?
Oh, what did I do? I probably stayed up till 4 a.m. And I probably was too loud, and I probably said a lot of innuendos that I meant, but everyone else thought that I was too young and cute to have said what I just said.
See, we finally have someone young answering these questions, and
yeah.
I just went to sleep so that I could fight the next day.
I was surprised that Felix didn't say I went to bed early, because he has a running joke. There was one year at Roni Festival that he deliberately stayed up later than me, and then he was very drunk. He told everyone on the way back to his tent, he's like, you tell Eva tomorrow that I was up later than her. They did.
That's funny. Okay, who's your favorite fight ever?
This one's so hard. I love fighting so much. I'm a very feel-based fighter. So I love fights that have a good flow to them and that are well matched. So I'm going to say Sir Rufus from Brisbane. So he's from St. Florian. At Great Northern War, for the past few times I've gone, he always like comes out on the pickup field with me after the event, and we'll just fight until we're falling down. And he's a longsword guy, so he'll fight longsword, and I got my sword and board, but we flow together so well, and they're always really amazing, well-matched fights that just, you know, they go on forever, and they're amazing. So that's my favorite. They're just so fun.
That's cool. And then the bonus question is, who is the cleanest fighter in your kingdom?
Sir Oz from Tasmania, Guillaume de Oz. So he was my champion last time I reigned. Amazingly courteous gentleman. You can't fault his fighting.
Cool. That's cool. Well, thank you so much. I mean, this has been really fascinating. You're amazing. I can't believe you're so young.
But, sorry, I kept you so long.
No.
Thank you.
I could talk to you for a long more time about philosophical stuff, but you know, we've been here for a while. So someday, maybe, you know, you and Mari and I can get on Zoom and just chat.
That would be awesome. I would love that. Thank you so much for having me. It's been so fun.
Thank you. And so everyone else, tomorrow night is Duke Ron. So that'll be fun. And then next week, Shaxi and I are interviewing Viscountess Natalia, which will be fun too.
And you're going to be in on the Branch of Laurels with Dame Varia with me.
Yes. Dame Varia too, who is awesome.
Twofer.
All right. So thanks everyone for joining us. Thank you very much. And we'll see you next time.
Good night.
See you.
Thank you.